These are the Posthumous Memoirs by Madame Blavatsky, dictated by the spirit world, upon the typewriter, independent of all human contact, to bring to light the things of truth and affirm the continuity of life and the eternal activity of the Soul Immortal. And this is Chapter 2, Failure in Matrimony and Fellowship. I began to realize what an obnoxious relation peoples were obliged to enfold themselves in, that the race would proceed with its varied duties and establish throughout the generations the perfected life which was the need of creation and the use of procreation. I had, as a girl, come to the understanding of my sex and its relevant aspect. And among the events associated with my nurses, I was constantly twitted with the statement that, quote, no one would marry me on account of my impervious will and inflammable temper, end quote. And it was said that even the plumeless raven would decline me for a wife. This, and then in brackets it says, this was the title which in a moment of pique and sarcasm I adopted for General Blavatsky. So fired by this taunt, and to emphasize it 3 days after it, I made the old man propose, and then I was so frightened at what I had done, my precipitation, my foolhardiness, I sought to escape from his acceptance of the offer. But the fatal step had been taken, and when too late, I knew that I would be tied to a master whom I did not love and with whom I would never be happy. That while tied to him by the laws of the country, hand and foot, and in the fear of offending those who would become responsible before society for me in that function, I held my peace and watched calmly the proceedings to enslave me in the most horrible of associations. I was married, however, on the 7th of July, 1848, to General Nikifor Blavatsky, who was vice governor of the province of Yerevan, Caucasus. It was at the home of my grandmother and other relatives, a summer retreat among the beautiful mountains which were much frequented by the residents of Tiflis. My father was not present, he being away with the regiment in the interior of Russia, and although I besought him by letter to help me to become free from the entanglements of my rash conduct, it was a long time before I even heard from him, and then it was his opinion that I would be the better for a guardian, and the older he was, the more likely he could find me an opportunity to respond to his wants as an associate and companion. In any event, he would take no decided stand and left it to those who were on the ground and therefore more able to form an opinion as to the relative merits of the frequent family councils which were then being held and my future severely discussed. I consoled myself with the belief that I would find relief from family enslavement as a married woman and could secure a more increased liberty of action than I would ever obtain as a maiden, and as I contemplated anyhow that I would abandon the whole lot of them and give myself to travel and adventure, I thought I might find some element of relief in the association of another with my family while it lasted, with another than my family while it lasted. On the evening of the 6th day of July, 1848, I received a message from my occult lodge. Just as I was retiring to obtain much-needed rest, and with a moonlit beam of light, the astral messenger came floating towards me, hardening into the outer material form as it sought the magnetic aura of my receptive presence. And if there were no other reason for these posthumous memoirs, I should consider this one letter in quotes, sufficient, and an apodictic reply to all my cacophonous critics. The message in substance was as follows, and was impressed upon a flimsy piece of paper in red colors, and the whole thing being of greater density than the atmosphere itself. Quote, accept the events which give you the name and title needed. The elements of the mind and the integuments of the soul can only be inspired by the actual realities of external perception and fact. In the coming search, you will find in the name of Blavatsky the key to your incarnate existence at this era, and this will reveal to you the quality of your mission in upasaka, upasaka, for the real baptism, which is the esoteric meaning of the word Blavatsky, is the descent of the spirit into matter and its unfoldment in the new generation. There were some other words which are secret and related to my psychological polarity in the realm of sexlessness, and these I withhold at this time, but can give them to anyone to whom they belong as a vital issue in their life. I began to realize that I must not only marry, but escape from its entanglements by flight. I am sure I became a perfectly unmanageable bride, and after quarrels innumerable, and each fighting the other for impossible concessions, I finally took horse on my own account and rode to Tiflis, on the way to my father, who arranged to meet me at Odessa. I began to think that my father might endeavor to deliver me anew into the hands of my husband, and refasten the broken links of my nuptial bond. So I began to plan how I could escape them entirely, and begin at once the adventurous life which I had long mentally resolved should be part at least of my career. I lost the steamer at Poti, P-O-T-I, and avoided the escort that had been sent to me through Georgia. While walking along the quay at the edge of the harbor, I saw a small sailing vessel which attracted my fancy, and, never having been free before, I immediately conceived the idea of a voyage in her. I went aboard of her, and by liberal outlay of rubles, of which I had a plentiful supply at the time, I persuaded the skipper and commander to agree to my plans. The craft was named the Commandatore, and was booked first to Kerch, Kertsch, then to Taganrogs, Tgaganrogz, in the Sea of Azov, Azof, and ultimately to Constantinople. I took passage to Kerch for myself and servant, but only ostensibly, and then, sending the servant ashore upon some arbitrary errand which existed only in my imagination, I caused the captain to sail for Taganrogs, as the vessel had business at that port, and afterwards returning to the Black Sea for Constantinople. I felt that now I had shaken myself free from the last restraints of my past life, relatives, friends, servants, and nurses, of which my whole existence seemed to be full up to that time, and with it I cast all the traditions, religions, conventionalities, social follies, and the entire concatenation of duties which seek to hold everyone in the sphere of illusions, and use the entire life for no other purpose than to repeat the empty events of our predecessors and entirely abrogate the possibility of originality, freshness, vigor, or iridescent charm of individuality, which is the only element in life that can give man an deity which will free him in the sphere of existence and make of him aught but a mental idiot and slave. I, at this time, was sustained by the undines and water fairies, and had a long conversation with the captain of the small craft upon which I made the journey. I often think that he must have considered me in my freshness and total inexperience of men, as I betrayed in every look and gesture my suburban and adolescent guile. We conversed about spirits of the dead and whether they ever came at a moment of peril when upon the deep sea, with guidance and counsel on if they could communicate when they did come, the method, and all the other matters above the earth and under the sky, until I began to see that the captain entertained me with a reverence neither admirable nor safe, and it was only with the power of the steward that I escaped from his subsequent persecutions. Our little voyage was full of adventures and incidents, but I will not stop to chronicle them. The harbor constabulary came aboard on our arrival, and it had to be so managed that my presence would not be suspected. While the cabin boy hid among the coals, I borrowed his personality and was stowed away among the bedding on pretense of sickness. Again, when the vessel arrived at Constantinople, there were a series of further embarrassments, and as a result, I was obliged to be taken ashore most inopportunely in a caique, C-A-I-Q-U-E, by a steward who delivered me into the care of a Russian lady whom I had an intimacy with, the good Countess Kalnoroysky, and with her I made quite a stay, traveling through many countries and under the stars of many constellations. I communicated privately with my father and had his consent to variable program of foreign travel, so that it cannot be said that I was a thorough renegade afar from the parental roof. I knew that General Blavatsky tried for a divorce and separation, but this could only please me and my father, realizing that it would be impossible to resume the broken line of my married life, even if my husband would consent to such a course, if I myself would keep me supplied with money and was impervious to solicitations as to my whereabouts and subsequent movements. It was a good 10 years before I saw again any of my relatives, and my resistless eagerness for travel and the delight of fresh acquisition of knowledge, the inspiration coming from new scenes and intimacy with unknown people, carried me to every part of the world. There was no published account of my experiences, and I have sought to avoid giving any, but I will now relate some of them, that it will be known that I have indeed returned from the dead to give the truth and establish the fact of intercourse between the two worlds of existence. I was wandering one day upon the boulevard in Paris, near the Church of the Madeleine, entirely alone, when a man approached and thrust into my hand a paper containing an account of a famous mesmerist and medium who was receiving visitors upon the Boulevard Montmartre, or near there. He was the celebrate known as Cagliostro, or so nicknamed after his predecessor, and was an adept of black magic stripe. But at that time I did not know the difference, and the intent appealed to me as much as a far superior wisdom could have done. I'm going to spell his name here. Cagliostre. Cagliostro. At a later hour, I was enabled to slip the attendant given to me by the countess I was stopping with, and made him a visit, and made my introductory bow to the first shrine where magic was practiced. Mantramic power unfurled, and the elementary hosts invited with their brood of dugpas to create the will of the aspirant and devotee. I well remember how vivid my sight in the astral world became at this time, and I saw events and personages as clear as though they stood before me in the flesh. This master was anxious that I should remain under his guidance, and discovering in me the quality of the impressive lucid or sensitive, tried to hold me in his power. But no chains were ever forged at that time that could hope to hold me a prisoner, and after doing some experiments and finding the beginning of the science of spiritistic and mediumistic phenomena dawning within my own person, I fled precipitously to London, and at the Hotel Mivart, M-I-V-A-R-T, in the company with the Countess B, passed some time in strict seclusion, and after she left London, I remained there on Half Moon Street, number 45, with the Countesses Demoiselles de Compagnie, and now had good opportunity to accept invitations from my own countrymen with whom I was already acquainted, or who were glad to befriend me. Before I quitted Paris, I had many interviews with the dead at the morgue, where I was a frequent visitor, and each time that I wandered to the Notre Dame to see the greasy mass and the priests and chanteurs and with heads like monkeys, I never failed to see the last finding of the Seine, or the one who was murdered in the night, lying upon the frozen slab with water trickling over them inside the glass case at the city's home for the dead. And I'm going to pause here and continue next time. Till soon.